Daisy.
And I'm Terri.
And this is the Monday Mindset Podcast,
where we share things of interest to us and hopefully to you.
So let's get started with episode number 212. And today it is Terri's turn to share something. Terri, what do you have?
Well, Daisy, I have, going back to one of your favorite podcasts, and of course one that I love too, but I think it's been in your wheelhouse longer than it's been in mine, and that is Rangan Chatterjee's Feel Better, Live More. I started listening to a bite-size because, of course, they're short, and I thought, oh, great, I'll get something here. And then I was interested, so I started to go back and listen to the full episode. And while I was on my way there, I stopped and listened to another bite-sized episode that was also related.
Catches your eye, doesn't it, as you're scrolling back?
That's right. So I've got kind of a conglomeration. But it is one of these topics that we've covered numerous times in various ways, and everyone has heard in numerous ways and various times. So just kind of highlighting it again for all of us. The episode that the bite-size episode came from has a very long title, and it was an hour-and-a-half episode, but it's called The Truth About Stress, Belly Fat, Alcohol, and Journaling, and How to Tune Into Your Body and Mind with neuroscientist Pera Swart. Mm-hmm. Then the bite-size episode that I pulled up for today, a very recent pulling from that bigger episode, and it's called 3 Simple Habits to Manage Stress and Build Resilience. So of course, I grabbed it because 3 simple steps.
We like that.
And the other bite-size episode that I listened to was from one of my favorites, Dr. Nicole Pera.
Ah, yes.
Hers is called Reduce Stress and Anxiety with These Powerful Breathing Practices. So we're going to talk about stress today, as you can tell. In the episode with Pera Swart, Rangan kind of highlights this number, and he says about 80 to 90% of what doctors see is really stress related. And unfortunately, I think many doctors are kind of limited in what they can offer. And so they always leave you by saying, reduce stress, eat less, move more. These are the 3 solutions to everything. But we need to be able to kind of think about the impact of stress and how to reduce it. She kind of defined that basically a stress response is when the load on the body is really just too much for it to handle. And then you switch into this stress response, which is perceived as threat. So your adrenal glands release more cortisol. As that rises, it crosses the blood-brain barrier, these stress hormones, and your brain receptors start to really perceive that you're in this chronic state of stress, this elevated stress response, and this is very pro-inflammatory. Well, what does that do? Well, it definitely has a direct effect on our cardiovascular system, our immune system, our gastrointestinal system, but also some other things like dehydrating. So your skin is dry, your hair is frizzy, might be stress response. Your skin is flaky, It also kicks in an ancient survival strategy where the body switches over to storing more body fat because this is a safe thing to have a little more excess fuel to get through those big pushes, and particularly storing fat around the belly. And so both of them talked about as medical professionals that oftentimes people would come to them seemingly doing well in their life and how they were eating and how they were exercising and things, but their belly fat was increasing or other health problems. She talked about, for example, stress-induced heart attacks, and she was working with a company who brought her in. They're concerned they had a high rate of heart attacks with their employees, and not your typical, stereotypes of who you would think would be at risk for a heart attack. They were having younger people, women, and all of these things. And then Rangan shared an example of he had a patient once who came in who had started to develop type 2 diabetes. She was pre-diabetic moving into diabetes, but he knew it was not food related. She managed her food very well. She managed her exercise very well, but it was stress. And once they removed the stressors, once she managed her stress more effectively, it was gone again. So these bigger health issues that arise from chronic stress as well. They both agreed that, unfortunately, we tend to underestimate the role of stress. And, again, we kind of focus on the other things like, well, if I focus on my diet and my exercise, then I'm okay.
Yeah.
And we forget that stress is always playing a role in our metabolic functioning, in our overall health conditions and things. And so, again, he targeted the idea that, unfortunately, then doctors know to go back to eat better, exercise more, and don't really know how to help people a lot with stress. She mentioned the idea that there are some differences with men and women, and just that, unfortunately, right now, she sees a lot, and she was a neuroscientist, she was a psychiatrist, so obviously she got to see another angle of people's health, but that women often put pressure on themselves to do everything. We're known to be better multitaskers, so now there's all this pressure to be doing everything at 110%. And then they try to manage all of this by doing really intense cardio exercise. And she says, you're actually the person who needs to do less of that because that's more cortisol on an already taxed system. So I thought that was important.
Yes, because that's quite a typical thing, isn't it? Yeah, I relieve stress by going, not when I say I, not talking about me, but yeah, you hear it. It is that does seem to be really typical in that sort of busy mums. Yeah, I relieve my stress by going and pounding it at the gym.
That's right, or running 10 miles.
Yeah.
She said men are actually pretty good at adaptive stress responses. The big stress comes, they deal with it, and then they kind of retreat. They go into the man cave, they bring that stress level back down. Women don't do as well with that. And women tend to benefit a lot by kind of inoculating them from stress responses by their kind of regular habits. She also talked about how much this affects our work and our functioning mentally, because as the brain perceives threat, it shuts down some of the skills that we need to be able to use because it reroutes blood flow. So it kind of determines, hey, these skills, they aren't really necessary right now in this threat. So we're going to take some blood away from this. So things like complex decision-making, emotion regulation, thinking flexibly, suppressing biases, and being creative, those things are kind of thwarted when we're in this high stress response. Also encouraging for companies and industries to look at how can we help our employees reduce stress, because we're going to get better work from them if their brains are not shutting these things down. She also talked about in the stress state, you tend to make decisions and feel more based on fear, shame, and anger. And obviously this interferes or guides how we're going to make decisions. So really important reasons why we should be focusing on stress. Another stressor that she talked about in the longer version, and I won't go into as much detail about this, but something that I've been talking about lately in the TFM community more, is that when we're living our life that is not congruent with our values, that this actually is a stressor. Let's say, for example, you work somewhere that really just feels like you are going against everything you believe is good. That's a chronic stressor, to be out of alignment with your values. And so this is really an important thing to be addressing. And I've been talking about it as far as making decisions about our health and our eating habits and things, to really have those aligned with our value systems. In this bite-sized episode, and again, in the longer one, she really boiled it down to two primary ways to offload stress from the body. The first one, you and I have been talking about this a lot lately, physical exercise, sweating it out, getting that stress released in that way. And then also speaking it out, talking verbally, and for some people, writing, like journaling. She really emphasized the importance of that. She highlighted that being able to talk verbally is even more effective than the journaling, but she knows that that's not always available to people depending on their resources and, do they have supportive people around them. So Rangan Chatterjee shared that he had recently gone on a retreat with his closest friends, and they went for a long walk, and just how cathartic it was to have these people that you know and trust to really process things with and talk with. And they were exercising.
Was she quite specific about the kind of exercise you do then? Because if she's earlier said don't add the stress of exercise, is she sort of saying, well, yeah, you should be doing things like walking or yoga or something that's a more calm type, relaxing exercise?
In the shorter version, she did not go into any detail. And if she did go into that in the longer one, I only made it about 45 minutes into that one.
Yeah. Logically, I would assume, there would be a differentiation there.
Absolutely. Yeah, not using as so much leaning into those that are cortisol producing. So high intensity workouts are stressors, and they do activate cortisol. And if we're working on lowering cortisol, that is not our best option. So he asked her, well, what do you do? What do you do based on all of this knowledge that you have? And she says she starts her morning before she even gets out of bed with gratitude. And it can be really simple. I'm grateful for this pillowcase. These sheets are so comfy. I'm so grateful for this bed. Just starting in that mindset. And he highlighted, oh, so you're not hopping on your phone and checking your emails right away? She said, no, I get in this place of gratitude. Then she does some deep breathing exercises. Then she gets up. She has a probiotic that she takes, which kind of makes her pause for 10 minutes before she then drinks her tea. And she talked about that as a ritual for her. And she said that rituals are so important with stress inoculation. They are ways to have moments of mindfulness. And as you and I have been talking about a lot of these things lately, we can't just do these rituals only when we get stressed. It's the doing them on a regular basis that helps, again, inoculate our body, prepare our body for better, more effective stress management when the stressors happen. So again, you can't wait and journal just when you're highly stressed. You need to journal regularly. You can't use the breathing activities only in those high stress moments. You can use them then, of course, but you need to be using them throughout the day to really get the body in this lower stress response more often.
Reminds me of, he's spoken about this before, and this is a regular thing that he called his tea ritual, where he sits down and spends 5 minutes with a cup of tea with his wife and they chat.
That's right.
So that's ticking quite a few boxes there, isn't it?
Absolutely. And so she said the most impactful stress reduction that we all can work on is things for our physiology, like drinking enough water, getting enough sleep, consistent timing of sleep, similar time to bed, similar time to get up. So she talked about those just physiological things that can be so helpful for our stress responses. And then she highlighted that she really values these three even more so: spending time in nature, having meaningful social connections, and having a purpose that transcends you. So, having things that your bigger purpose in life, and that those three things are some of the most important ways to keep working on reducing our overall stress. So then I switched gears again, as I said, as I was like going back to find the bigger episode. I found this other episode with Nicole, Pera, and she talked about stress a little differently. She's a psychologist, so both of these women kind of experts in brain and physiology and things. But she talked about that our ability to cope with stress helps us to feel safer in the moment, helps us to feel safer in our body. When our body is threatened, we feel threatened, our body feels threatened, and it's tense, and it goes through certain responses. She talked about one way to create this sense of safety in your body is to use our breath work. And she highlights the idea that there are so many ways you can do breath work, and there are coaches and programs and manuals that you can get to teach a variety of breath work activities. But the couple that she really highlighted, one is 5 deep belly breaths. She says you need to do this regularly. Again, you don't just start your day with it, but you do it throughout the day. We need to get our body into this calm state throughout the day, again, to help it deal with stress that's coming. And she said, of course, this is not a magical tool. It's not like, do 5 deep belly breaths, and everything's going to get great in your life. But you can really feel more primed by starting with this first thing in the morning, being in this better place, and then using it throughout the day. And Rangan chimed in and said, sure, it's not a magic tool, it's not a magic fix, but its effects can be quite magical. And then she talked about something you and I talked about before, the physiological sigh. And if you think about it, sighing happens throughout our day outside of our awareness. I'm a pretty frequent sigher. People will catch it and they're like, what? And I'm like, nothing. What do you mean? They're like, well, you just sighed. I'm like, oh, didn't even realize it. So it does happen even outside of our intentionality, because our body is intentionally doing this thing to relieve this stress and calm our energy. So she talked about breathing in to the count of 4. I know you've mentioned this recently, and out for double that, and elongating that sigh, that releasing of the breath. But most important, she said, find the breathwork activities that work best for you. So you might hear this physiological sigh and practice it and think, I don't know if that one's really best for me. Go ahead, look at box breathing, look at this, look at Wim Hof and his, 25 rapid exhales and holding the breath or whatever it is. But using breath work as a really great way to proactively get your body in a better place to respond to stress, and then also using breath work in those high stress moments. And one of the reasons I always come back to breath work, and I'm certainly not a breathwork expert. I don't know 110 breathwork activities, but I believe it's so powerful because we can do it anywhere. No one even needs to know that you're doing a breathwork activity. Yeah. No one needs to know that you're having a stress response right now. You can do something really helpful for it, without even being kind of known.
Yeah, like you said, none of these things are particularly new, but I like how you grouped 2 things together that really go well together. And as I said, another time that we record, I keep forgetting to do this, preventative, regular routine, but I am becoming a bit more aware of the breathing. Funnily enough, when we're recording this podcast and when you're talking, it often comes to mind. So I'm thinking about my breathing. So there are times when it, when I think about it and am more aware of it. So although I don't do it regularly, and it does make a difference. And it came up in some novel or other I was listening to the other day where she'd been trained. She'd gone through a particularly traumatic experience. And when she was struggling to talk about it, and they explained how it was important, the breath work was important just to enable her to be able to speak, to be able to think about something, that she had to get her body from one physiological state into another just to practically be able to do the thing that she was trying to do. And that was exactly the same kind of techniques that you've been talking about. This elongated out breath is the important part, isn't it? It's the bit that is the calms your whole system down. When we've heard that, I can remember hearing that from way back from when I was a child, count to 10, just take a deep breath. It's all the same thing. We know how to do it. We just sometimes have to remind ourselves.
That's right. We need to get into the habit of doing it, not only in those moments. Again, the other thought I had before we go, Daisy, is spending time outside. And I think both you and I have been benefiting from that.
Definitely.
And sometimes I forget the benefit of that, but how much that is a useful thing health-wise, stress level-wise. You've been talking about time that you've spent with your dogs outside and things, and how helpful that really is. And it's multi-purpose. You're relieving their stress, getting their excess energy out, but it's also really healthy for you. So I think it's a great one.
Yeah, and you're almost always moving as well. Obviously not always, but you tend to, even if it's just the getting there and back, there's some movement involved in that as well. Quite often some kind of social connection, even if it is just with your dogs or the weird sounding bullfrogs that I was trying to figure out on our walk the other day. So yeah, some great reminders there. And I think in particular this reminder to try and inoculate, try to make it a preventative thing, especially for women by the sounds of it.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I hope you have a not too stressful week. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Have a wonderful week.
Take good care, everybody. Lots of deep breaths.